Till 98 of passengers involved in vehicle crashes in Dubai were not wearing seat belts. I lived in Abu Dhabi, about an hour and a half from Dubai, for close to a decade. One weekend, I was in a cab going to a brunch, and we went past the scene of a very recent collision. A wailing father was holding the bloodied body of his dead son in his arms. I later read that a newborn in the car that caused the collision had both of its femurs broken. How the fuck do you explain that to a baby? Guess what? No one was wearing seatbelts. I saw kids on people's laps every damn day there. Saw more dead people in Dubai than I had anywhere in my life. Most horrific upon a rollover just off the bypass road a couple of minutes after it happened. Police were already on the scene, or I would have stopped. The car had flipped multiple times, ejecting what looked like a large family and rolling over them as it did. So 5-6 victims laid out in a line. The speed must have been excessive to say the least. But that also is Dubai. I'm always reminded of Lady Diana's inquest, where they found the death of the deceased was caused or contributed to by the fact that the deceased was not wearing a seat belt. There are estimates that she would have had an 80% chance of survival if she buckled up. The car was doing double the speed limit, hit an immovable object and ended up a crumpled mess, and she'd have survived if she'd worn her seat belt. I lived in the Middle East, and if you buckle your seatbelt while an Arab man is driving, you might as well spit in his face while sobbing hysterically. If you do it while you are driving, it means you're a coward with no faith in yourself and God. I've literally had a Tunisian taxi driver who was driving like a fucking maniac take his eyes off the road, reach over, and unbuckle my seatbelt after I buckled it mid-ride. Visited my family in Morocco recently, and no one except for me wore a seatbelt whenever we rode a taxi. They would just kind of laugh it off while the car drives 100 kilometers height. It was even worse over a decade ago, when the taxis drove rusty tin cans without any seatbelts whatsoever. It's a miracle I never ended up in an accident in those death traps. We used to be really bad at using seatbelts in the US too. I don't think we started wearing them regularly until the early 80s. I remember going to pick up my brother from the hospital in 1968, standing in the area for your legs in front of the front seat while my dad drove. I was just a little over 3 years old. Just a side note. I was driving through Montana and they had ads for Click It or Ticket. For the longest time I had no idea what it was referring to until I went to refill gas, and there was a digital ad at the fill station. Which makes me think people in Montana don't wear seatbelts. I lived near Dubai and this shit was insane. Kids climbing around in the cars, infants in arms in the front seat, the works. The explanation given for why seatbelts were unnecessary was God will save us if He intended us to live. Bitch, God gave you a car with seatbelts, use them. I'm 48 hours out from a serious car accident. T-boned a guy at 80 km/h who ran a stop sign. Various minor injuries to myself, wife, our 2 kids, but I'm confident we'd all be dead if we weren't wearing seatbelts in car seats. Ridiculous that anyone chooses not to wear them. No wonder they're so violent and sadistic. The ones who survive the Ferrari crashes are the ones with severe head trauma and become like the Mad King in Game of Thrones. A contributing factor, not the root cause. I'm going there in 5 days to see my long-term GF Adam. The drivers are batshit insane. 15-20 over the speed limit while the streets are packed. No one seems to give a fuck. Thankfully the metro is good. Worked in Saudi, Kuwait, and Dubai. Almost nobody, Arabs that is, wears seatbelts. It's the Muslim idea of inshallah, loosely God's will. That means simply if it's my time then it's my time. I'm Arab and this is bullshit. 90 of Dubai isn't even Arab and was born outside the Middle East. My Arab friends wear their seatbelts just as much as my American friends. So do 98 of passengers in Dubai not wear seatbelts, or is there a causal relationship between having a passenger not wearing a seatbelt and having an accident? Not to mention they don't like to put their kids in car seats in the Middle East. I've seen small kids riding in the front seat like no big deal. From the comments in here explaining why this is a prime example of why culture and tradition can be dead wrong in every way. I guess every country has to figure out for themselves that seatbelts are a good idea, rather than learning from other countries. When I was a kid nobody buckled their seatbelt. I think I was in high school or college when the trend caught on. For some reason in a lot of countries wearing your seatbelt is seen as an insult to the driver. It's weird. That likely means that 98 of drivers that aren't getting into accidents are also not wearing seatbelts. What a weird hill to choose to die on. Seatbelt saves lives. I can care less if it offends someone. Nothing quite like unbuckling your belt on the highway to hell. Seriously, though. Stupid fuckers. I'm all for it honestly. doesn't impact anyone else and is a healthy means of natural selection. Pretty safe to assume that most people who choose to live in Dubai don't make smart decisions. Good thing they are wearing white sheets so they can quickly see where you are bleeding from. So, what's the rate of all drivers wearing seatbelts in Dubai? Low compliance, is it? You just found this out? Man, you need to watch some desert drifting videos on YouTube. It's perfect correlation. Seatbelts cause vehicle crashes. Glad we cleared that up. Dang, well, at least they just hurting themselves. At least Tim boys don't drink, right? It has been a while, but I have been to Dubai a few times. They drive crazy there. There was a scientist years ago who wrote a book about this. Charles something. That simply means that 98% of passengers as a whole in Dubai don't wear seatbelts. Is this machismo or some sort of let it ride, God will decide fate thing? They're determined to find out if their religion is real or not. So they'd rather be in a wheelchair than a Porsche. Cool. The Middle East is in the 50s in more ways than one. So, 98% of passengers in Dubai don't wear seatbelts. Why would you put a seatbelt on only 2% of your body?